everybody. You came back. Thank you. I really do have to say thank you, because if it weren't for you guys, I probably wouldn't have shaved today. So thank you for that. I appreciate it. Today, I'm going to show you how to use a proportion divider. Now, on my last drawing video, a couple videos back, I mentioned a proportion divider, but I didn't use it on that particular video. So I thought, you know, this was a good video in order to show you how to use it. Now, some of you may be well aware of a proportion divider, and for some of you it might be brand new. So a proportion divider comes in, for us artists, comes in a little tube like this. This one happens to be called, or made by Accuracy. And inside the tube you get some use instructions, how to use it, and you get this little baby. And this is a proportion divider. As it is, the proportion divider has two useful ends. The first end, if I open this up here, is the smaller end. And you can tell it's the smaller end because it has the little holes closer to it. And then it has a larger end, a longer end. And what you do is you take the shorter end and you measure your reference. A lot of times it's across the room. You could have it right on your desk, I suppose, and take the measurements right off of it. But let's say we were going to take measurements off of this drawing, and this is the photo I'm going to be using today. And you can take your measurement to, let's say, find out what the depth of the hat is, and then using the longer end, using this longer end, you take and you put your marks here and here, and that will give you, you know, the height of the hat, or whatever it is you measure. Now, depending on how far forward you put this little button here, because this is removable, you can move it forward, and that will give you a larger proportion on this side. And the farther you move this button back, it'll be more of a one-on-one or one-to-one proportion. So basically what you're going to want to do is take your measurement on this side and check to see on your drawing if that's about the size you want it to be. If it's not, if it needs to be larger, then you move this little button forward, and if it needs to be smaller, you move it backward. So you take and you make your measurements on your drawing, transferring each one of these little tick marks, and by the time you're done, using this proportion divider along with taking taking angles off of him, such as, let's say, the angle of his eyes, and then you'd bring it over and you'd do a little mark as to what that angle is. And using the angles and the proportion divider, you're going to get a nice little map as to where everything needs to go. And then it's really just a matter of taking and connecting the dots. Now, one thing you need to remember on something like this, using a proportion divider, is you need to stay the same distance throughout the whole time you're measuring from your reference and your drawing. You need to be consistent. Now, a lot of times when I use this, I'll use this across the room and I will bring my arm right straight out. And doing that, you're going to be consistent with taking your measurements from either your model or your photo or whatever it is that you're using, and then you can come back and put it onto your drawing. As long as you do that, you're going to be accurate. But if for one time let's say you take it right close to you, and then the next time you move your arm closer, things are going to be wonky, and so it's not going to work. Make sure that you are consistent in where you take your measurements. I have this in the video, but I wanted to explain it to you a little bit first, because if you didn't understand how this works, it probably wouldn't help you very much to watch me using it. So anyways, let's go on over to the drawing board and I will show you exactly what I do, how I do it, and I'll bring my coffee. Okay, come on. Come on, come on. All right, so here we are at the drawing board. Well, okay, I was at the drawing board when I did this. Now I'm just sitting at my desk doing a voiceover. So I start out by doing a rough in. And once I have that rough in, I know basically how big I want things to be. Then I use the proportional divider. And just like I showed you before, I start out by taking a measurement of, let's say, the width of the brim. And I make my marks. Go back, take the height of the crown, take it back onto my paper, and make my marks. Now, before I started this, I made sure that the entire drawing was going to fit onto my paper by checking with the proportional divider. The side of the brim of the hat here, and this one is the width of the head. And really what I'm doing is I'm double checking to make sure that the first ones I put down were accurate. And you keep doing this until you have everything in place for you to be able to start adding some details. And I use this only towards the beginning of the drawing. As the drawing progresses, I don't need it anymore. But I want to remind you of something I said in the introduction of the video. Just remember, you have to stay the same distance away from your reference and take those measurements. And when you put the other side down on the paper, obviously that will be the same size relationship as well. As long as you do that, those measurements are going to remain accurate for you. And so using this proportion divider, along with taking angles, like the angle of his eyes there, you will get everything where it needs to be very quickly, and you won't have to worry about why something is too big or too little or in the wrong place. And so here I am taking the length of the nose and again transferring it over onto where it would be in the drawing, and constantly I'm checking my angles to make sure that things are going down where they should go. I'm spending a lot of time on the front part of this, just getting the eyes and the nose right, checking to make sure that everything's the right size. If you don't get that triangle area there correct, the size and the position of the eyes and the nose, it's not going to look like the person, which is kind of, one of the points of doing something like this. Nobody knows outside of myself and maybe his family what this guy looks like. So for this particular drawing, it doesn't have to look just like him. But using the proportion divider, I want to show you that it's easier to get that likeness of someone as long as you take those accurate measurements. So it is a real benefit to use this tool. And you'll notice that, I'm only using it a little bit now. I've got the hard part as far as getting the measurements taken, and that's the size of the hat, the width of the head, the height of the crown, the width of his eyes, that kind of stuff. And so I've got those in there. The rest of it I can do by taking just general measurements from the length of my pencil, like you see the quintessential artists where they'll stick the pencil out and they'll use their thumb to measure off something, and then you bring it back, measure it that way. I am kind of jumping the gun here a little bit and adding in some of the tones. I just can't help myself. I should be laying in everything else rather than going and putting in values. So excited to try and get his face that, once you get this done, that's 3/4 of the battle. So, don't do what I do what I say. So you should actually put everything, get the line work done first and then come back with the values. But what are you going to do? You can't teach artists anything. Well, you can teach artists. You just can't teach them much. And I think it was right about here that I decided, you know what? Stop this. Start putting in the rest. So So I started on his arm and his hand and the gun, that kind of thing. I swear. I know better, but I still have to slap my own wrist now and then. You know, we're 11 minutes into this drawing, and I probably should mention the fact that everything is going to look more narrow to you than it does to me because I have to put the camera off to the side to be able to record this. I can't draw with the camera right on top of me, and there's no way for me to mount it on the easel that I can find that it doesn't kind of get in my way. So everything is just a little more smushed, and it'll look better once you see the finished drawing. But I just thought it was worth mentioning. As I'm roughing in the hand, let me just mention that the paper that I'm working on is a Strathmore toned paper. This one happens to be, I think they call it tan, but they also make it in a light gray. And so I will be using that medium tone back there in order to have a medium value and then be able to put the beard over top of that, which would serve as the light value. But I love this paper. I try and use it as much as I can. And you can buy it in individual sheets, or you can buy it in pads, sketch pads. But I'll leave a link for it in the description, and give it a try if you like drawing and want to try something a little different. This is a wonderful paper to work on. In fact, a lot of times when I go out to paint or just to draw on location, I'll bring my tanned or a gray tone paper. It gets you where you're going pretty fast. It's a great surface to work on, and I just can't recommend it enough. You'll probably notice that when I draw, I'll put the tone down and then I'll go back in and do a little cross hatching or scratching, I call it. And it gives me a nice look. It's just something I've always kind of drawn that way, even when I was in high school or grade school. I think I probably looked at Leonardo drawings so much that it just got into my DNA. And that's why you'll see a lot of that hatching in there. And I probably couldn't change it now if I tried it. It's just too deeply embedded. It's kind of like trying to get the song Afternoon Delight out of your head, and the more you try, the worse it gets. Now, before I go in and put in some of that white chalk, you may notice that I use my eraser to try and get up any of the dark charcoal that's there, because the two don't really play well together. So you want to have a clean surface when you put your chalk down, your pastel pencil, your white pencil. Otherwise, you're going to get kind of a gray mess, and it's never going to sing the way you want it to. So just remember to use your eraser and clean off the surface of any residual black charcoal. And so once again, it's time for Question of the Week. Don't you just love having new software to play with? Today's question comes from Gail Franklin, and she said, question, when you get together with other artists for a photo shoot, are you paying money to the actors? And do you have to get written permission and consent from them to use them on your paintings? So they have no rights and no money from the sales of your artwork. Just curious how it works. Well, thanks, Gail. That's a great question. When I get together, whether it's a private photo shoot with just myself or some of my other artist buddies, or if I go to a group photo shoot, yes, we do pay all of our models for posing for us. Sometimes I pay them in money if, this is what they're coming for specifically. Sometimes I have my friends pose for me, and in lieu of payment, I make sure that they get a nice print of the painting or drawing after I'm done with it. And if they're okay with that, sometimes I do that instead of paying. As long as they're content with that, that's what we do. But yes, so this is how it generally works. You You get some models together, whether it's just you or your buddies, and they show up, and you have model releases that everybody signs, which basically says they're being paid for these photos. Well, whatever compensation you agree to. The photos are only going to be used as photo reference and will not be sold on the internet or sold as prints just by themselves. And that's the part that protects them. The part that protects you is that it says that they don't own any of the copyright to any artwork that's produced. They give up any rights to the sale of your painting, no matter how much it is, and that they can't come back later and claim that they're due more money because your painting sold for more. Also, it says that their descendants, their family, can't do that should they happen to die and someone gets in the mix who thinks that they were shortchanged, whatever, that they can't come back and try and change the contract later. I know that probably there's going to be lawyers that come on and say, those things don't really help all that much, but at least you have something. It's like you get married, and the ones who have prenups are a little more protected than those who don't. So it's just kind of a prenup between you and your model, and making sure that everybody understands the terms and is happy. I want to say that I actually even do this, or I've done this, if I'm down on the town square here in Prescott and I see somebody who's dressed up and I would love to paint them. I'll go up and I'll ask them if I can photograph them for a painting or for a drawing, and usually they'll say yes, and I'll tell them either I'll pay them a certain amount of money or I'll offer them a print. Usually people are very happy to participate, especially if they're out there, in period costume. So if I have my camera with me, I'll always have a contract with me. So I'll have them sign it and take the photo and everybody's happy. And I make sure that I get their contact info so that I can get them the copy of the drawing if I eventually go ahead and do that. Thank you for the question, Gail. I appreciate it. I hope that helps you and anyone else who might have had the same thought. If you have a question of the week for me, please put it down in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. As I'm coming down the home stretch on this drawing, I stepped back a little bit and I felt like it needed some darkness, especially up around the hat. It just seemed like he was floating a bit. And so I added in some tone around his head and sprayed it with a little bit of acetone to give it some texture. And I rolled my kneaded eraser around on it to give it a nice bit of texture. It's a nice little trick that will really help you to add a little more interest into the background. And it's really nice on a drawing like this. It adds a bit of age. I went in and added some finishing touches with my white charcoal just to give it a little bit more life. I like to put the visual eye candy just towards the end. And then I like to add a little bit of grunge in there. Again, it adds a little bit of age to the drawing. And so here is the finished drawing as it will be framed. It was a lot of fun to do for you. And thank you for stopping in the studio. It's time to turn out the lights, but if you like what you saw, please subscribe. And if you know someone who you think would like this video, go on and share it with them. And hit that like button. It really helps me out. All right, until then, I'll see you down the road.